Accurate podcast today. I am happy and very proud to bring you two gentlemen that I've been searching for a while. I think the catalyst was our co-host, Ryan Cunningham. We're talking about ranching, agriculture, and how it's lost its way in our country. We need more veterans and more people to be involved. And that sparked a search far and wide. And luckily we have LinkedIn, and I found two great individuals, Gilberto de Leon and Stetson Kornegay, two military leaders that are here with us today to talk about agriculture, and not just agriculture, but a better way to do it. Gentlemen, thank you for being here today with me.
Absolutely. Thank you for inviting us, Danny.
Yeah. So let's start off. Gilberto, please give us an introduction. Let us know who you are.
Absolutely. So, like you said, Danny, I'm Gilberto de Leon. I am a 17 years veteran, but I was born into the military, right? My father retired, sergeant major. Now I'm about to transition and retire here as a major in the United States Army. And long story short, prior enlisted, became an officer, and ended my career as a general's aide at camp. And I knew my next calling was agriculture. But I did not know agriculture was my next calling until I took a sabbatical. And now I realize the next mission, the next call for me and future veterans is regenerative agriculture.
Yep. And Stetson, please give us your intro. Give us your elevator pitch.
Well, I graduated from Auburn in 2010. Did the ROTC program, did the typical route to become a United States Army officer, and had a typical, pretty much officer career: platoon leader, executive officer. Did some staff time when I was in Hawaii, then did command. Then went on to join in a new unit called the SFAB, where we, trained, advised, assisted foreign militaries in both Afghanistan and, in my case, Africa, but of course SFABs all over the world. And when I got out of the military, about the 12-year mark, I said, I don't really know what I want to do yet next. Mm-hmm. I'm going to search out a vision, because like a lot of veterans, when you get out, you're part of this grand vision. And then you look around and go, well, where else can I find that feeling of being part of something larger than myself? And it's a very difficult thing to replicate. But I went to some networking events. I found some entrepreneurs who were very divergent in the way they thought. They said, we're pursuing regenerative agriculture. We like your dynamic mind. We want you to be part of our team. So I did. And me and Gil were platoon leaders together. I guess I'll kick off the story of how we know each other and transition my personal into that. But we were platoon leaders together in 269 Armor, 3rd Brigade, 3rd Idea at Fort Benning, Georgia. And, we were good friends then. And we had a great time together, as platoon leaders often do, as young leaders in the United States Army. And then we went our separate ways. And eventually I showed up at the new unit in Fort Bragg, North Carolina, getting ready to deploy to Afghanistan. And lo and behold, Gil de Leon is next to me as the team leader in this new unit that's being stood up. And I was like, how in the heck? I didn't know you were here. We separated again after Afghanistan. We went to Afghanistan. We were roommates. We supported each other on different combat missions. Our teams did. And then we separated again. So I went my route and met these entrepreneurs with this grand vision about how they want to utilize regenerative ranching and solve some of the problems we have in our food supply chain. Mm-hmm. And I called Gil, because Gil was on a grand journey, which I'm sure he's about to explain. And I said, hey, you need to come check out this ranch and check out what we're about. And we reconnected again. So you never know how you're going to meet in the world. The beauty of the Army and the military is such a great network. And, as many veterans, I could probably go anywhere in the world right now and have a couch to sleep on if I needed to. But the fact that me and Gil reconnected again after being roommates in Afghanistan is fantastic. And Gil, it was probably a good time to share your story about how
you guys are connected. You're definitely connected through through God and the universe.
I agree. It's divine intervention. That's what I call it, right? So I knew I wanted to go to agriculture, right? But I didn't know how to do it. And everyone thinks the romantic side of agriculture, fed barns, horses. But that's not profitable, and it's very hard, and it's a barrier to entry. So I started doing research, and regenerative agriculture was the way to go. So I did a grand tour with Dr. Alan Williams. He's the region leader of our world today, along with Alan Savory. And I partnered up with Soil Health Academy and Understanding Ag and created a program called Battlefields to Fertile Fields, allowing veterans to enter regenerative agriculture. So I spent 4 months on a road visiting nationally recognized ranches. And just to name a few, and if you're in regenerative agriculture, you will know all these names: Will Harris, David Brandt, Alan Savory, Dr. Alan Williams, Eric Fuchs. All these guys are the generals of agriculture. Like if you're in the Army, you don't know who General McConnell is, then you live on the rock. If you're in agriculture and you don't know the guys I just mentioned, you will live under the rock. Unfortunately for me, I connected with these region leaders and we built this program from ground up. Now that I'm done with this tour, like Kornegay said, I visited this ranch and they were able to incorporate my individual vision into a shared vision. Now we have a nonprofit called Operation REGEN, allowing and enabling seasoned veterans to enter regenerative agriculture. And what we're looking for, and the reason why I say seasoned, is guys like you, Danny, who knows management, who knows leadership. All we gotta do is teach them is how to regenerate our souls and how to stow cow, or maybe how to ride a horse. But that's what we can do. And it's all about train the trainer. You don't have to be an expert to train somebody.
Yeah.
Just like you being in special forces, you're learning while you're training, which is overwhelming, but it can be done. It's unconventional.
We've done it a lot.
We've done it a lot. So, and that right there is a solution in itself when it comes to regenerative agriculture. Right? People are trying to find the right person to be the next ranch manager, the next ranch hand. No, it needs to be train somebody and teach somebody and have them train while he's learning. That's what we bring to the fight. That's what we bring to regenerative agriculture is building, training as we learn, building the plan and flag. And that's what we're all about.
And Gil, I would like to add to that real quick, if you don't mind, is, we were talking about this before the podcast began, just in some small talk. And that is when people get out of the military, and this was certainly the case for me, a lot of these companies, these placement companies, they try to undervalue your military experience. They say, well, what you do doesn't necessarily translate. And that might be true to some extent. If you're going into a specific role, maybe your military experience doesn't translate into that specific role, and you have to do certain things to compensate. But military leaders do bring something to the table. And I almost get angry sometimes when I was told during these prep interviews or whatever else for corporate America, like, don't talk about that, or don't mention this, or make it a smaller example. No, military leaders, particularly in the last 20 years, have been in incredibly dynamic situations. Okay. They've exercised emotional intelligence at the extreme degree. They've been in austere and ambiguous environments. They know how to function when things aren't necessarily clear, when the path forward isn't necessarily clear. So when you're talking about standing up a culture for regenerative agriculture as this new thing that America is kind of adopting, the Department of Agriculture recognizes as a necessity to some of the issues that centralized agriculture and traditional agriculture, some of the problems that infrastructure has created. To me, a military veteran is the perfect solution to that, because just like Gil, what did he do? He went out to Soil Health Academy and said, "Hey, I have a solution to your problem. Let's build this nonprofit. Let's recruit. Let's start training people." And I think that's a perfect example of dynamic thinking being brought to the table to answer some of the problems with a space and tying people together, tying stakeholders together.
Yeah.
So
it's funny. I wanted to hit off something you brought up, and that's there are a lot of organizations that do transition right. We've, as the military, we were doing a horrible job with our own program. So we're kind of okay with like everybody else picking up the slack for us, which is not the right answer. I had the privilege of being part of an amazing program, the Honor Foundation. Shout out to them. But there are other programs that take the veteran and they say, "Hey, guess what? I'm going to put you in front of these big corporations and I'm going to sell you because that's where I want you. And I want you to feel that that's where you belong." When the reality is there's a vast majority of us veterans that are better suited to go into agriculture. We are complex problem solvers, especially in the soft world. We're not guys that want to put on a suit and tie, sit in a board meeting, sit in a cubicle, sit in an office space. But we're being told that, hey, you've got everything that these guys need. So this is where I'm going to push you to. You're going to love it there. And guys might for 5 or 6 months. And then as soon as that time period's over, they're like, holy shit, there's no culture of brotherhood. There's no culture of a purpose-driven mission to do something better. It's all about fucking money. And hey, maybe that's one element, but there's a whole bunch of other things that I'm not fulfilled in. And then they go right back into identity crisis. And that's where I feel what you guys are bringing is not only something that helps our country and our people, but it helps give purpose, passion, and drive. And it puts it at the front end. Like what could be better than figuring out like, oh shit, like this feels more connected to the natural world. This feels more connected to my values. It's not traditional farming. It's not traditional agriculture. It's trying to solve the issues that, quite frankly, are very, very, nested in what we're seeing, and it affects everything within our daily lives. Like these issues aren't going away. As much as they don't get covered on TV, these issues are going to be, I don't want to be eating grasshoppers in 10, 15 years. I don't know about you guys. I enjoy my steaks. I love Butcher Box. And I feel like we need to do a better job of putting this information and putting guys like you out in the forefront so people can see like, oh shit, this is an option. I can be outside. I can be out there solving one of the most crucial problems that our country has. Like, fuck yes.
You get to collaborate with the land and regenerate the minds of our veterans, all through touching soil and animals, right?
Yeah.
Because our surface, to our earlier conversation, is regenerate our minds.
Yeah.
Regenerating the soils is one thing, but most organizations that teach soil always exclude the human out of nature. In fact, humans belong in nature.
Yes.
Right? That's how we can regenerate our land and have more nutrient-dense food. But the humans has to be part of the equation. And this is going to lead to our next organization that Kornegay will talk about. It's Life Under the Sun. It's all inclusive. It's about the human, the veterans, not just about the soil or what's underneath our feet. Yes, that's a byproduct, but we need humans to manage that, right?
Yeah.
We cannot exclude humans. Kornegay, I would love to
please dive into that.
Before we talk about the specific organization, I think it'd be interesting to talk about why regenerative ranching is a thing in the USA, why it's a growing movement for agriculture.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it kind of ties in, from a military perspective, since we're three military guys sitting here talking, it does have, I think, national security implications. Because when you talk about a war in Ukraine, and, I don't remember the exact statistics, but I read, but a large percentage of our fertilizer was being imported from that area.
Yep.
And so now a war in Ukraine disrupts that. Well, we have a whole infrastructure in our food supply chain that's relying on that. Well, regenerative agriculture doesn't rely on fertilizer. It doesn't rely on inputs. It's a methodology, which Gil can go into later about how you actually do it, about animal management and how to utilize that animal management in a specific way on the land to get all the natural benefits of nature using natural intelligence, not artificial inputs, where you create biodiversity in the soil. So, you're addressing that. You're creating more resilient food supply chains when you go regionalized. And not only can a war in Ukraine disrupt something like that, let's think about the demographics of the world at large. You have a huge demographic population, not only in the U.S. that is getting to retire, exit the workforce, and unfortunately pass away just based on the facts of age, but that's also going on all across the world. So what do we see happening? We actually see a continued theme of deglobalization. And when you deglobalize, it creates problems because now all those imports that you've been relying on because there's so much capital in the global economy that's supporting that, what happens? Now it would be better and more probably resilient for our food supply chain if we went to a regionalized food structure. Yep. And you have local farms and regionalized farms supporting population centers. Okay. So regen farming addresses that. It addresses the nutrient density in the food. Right now, I think the last study I read said something like the estimate is we've lost, almost 60% of nutrient density in some of the produce that's been created due to centralized agriculture because of just the input. And it might even be it might be a little less, a little more than that, but it's around that. It's a large percentage of nutrient density. So I know in the security hall, one of the things that you've kind of talked about a lot is mental health. Yep. Well, what does it mean for mental health? Not only to reconnect with nature, because that's I think part of the alignment of what man and the spirit should be is you should be interconnected with nature. But what if you were eating nutrient dense food? There's studies out there that show that a cattle or a cow raised on a regen farm that is, verified regen, not organic or something like that, has a higher omega-3 ratio than an Alaskan salmon.
Yeah. No,
So-
it's absolutely tied together. It's one of the first things that I dove into. And one thing that I advocate with everybody that either comes to our support group or I meet and talk to online is, what are you putting into your body? What are you eating? There's a reason why when you are able to get in touch with great doctors like Dr. Mark Gordon, and he tells you like, hey, we have a treatment plan for you. We're going to go through this, but it's not pharmaceuticals. We're not looking to pump you up with a bunch of different chemicals. No, we're looking at feeding you right. We're looking at what are you deficient in? What do we need to give you as far as nutritional supplements? That's the one thing like we don't address. We don't talk about it because everybody's so just gleefully okay with just consuming your McDonald's, consuming your Burger King. And it's adding horrible things to your body that's amplifying the effects of the mental health issues you're already dealing with. Like you're constantly going to Starbucks and sucking down your Frappuccino. It's not helping you. It is not making things better.
And Danny, you're right on. And we have one person on our team that specifically focus on that, the spirit, the ecotheology, and why soil is important to our the end user, the consumer. And Rare Chaleta, if you know who he is the region leader of agriculture. He was on Kiss the Ground documentary, and he's on our team. And we need the right people, right? As we build an organization, the right people to hold us accountable. Region accountability, and Ray is that for us. And because we can't, Kornegay and I are amateurs. We'll always be amateurs in agriculture, because if you truly are a learner, you'll always be amateur.
Yep.
But Ray Letta, he's our guy. He's our accountability partner for region and health, eating the right thing. In fact, when we buy him to the ranch, Gil, you're eating terribly. Like that, in my face. You're eating terribly. I was like, okay, Ray, absolutely. But he's right. He's spiritual, and he's trying to attract the Christians out there to be a part of the movement out there, because it's biblical. Regardless if you're religious or not, there's something there that's higher than us of becoming stewardship of our land.
Yes.
And veterans are best suited for that because we're dynamic, diverse, and divergent. And seasoned veterans can do that just like yourself.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. And Gil, I think it'd be interesting, like, maybe explain some of your journey when you went to these ranches. You shared a story with me where you were eating all this regenerative food and it actually made you sick because your body wasn't used to it.
Yeah, you weren't used to the good stuff.
So my first farm I went to, it was called the Seven Sons Farm by seven brothers. And if the first veteran that comes to our program, that's a non-negotiable visit. And it's phenomenal because I'm so used to eating on the road. I ate their food. One, I didn't recognize the taste. First of all, it was way different. And I felt a little weird. But then the second day, my quality of sleep went up. I forgot about all my stresses out in the military, to include the current fight I'm going in. And that's another story, by the way, but I was able to, it just overall helped me as a human person, right? Being connected, seeing them move cattle, eating the byproduct, even eating raw milk or drinking raw milk, I slept better, felt more full.
Yep.
In my belly. It was just incredible. And that first visit was like, this is my next calling. How can I bring veterans into this, regardless if I'm experienced or not? Because at the end of the day, if I can maneuver troops, I can maneuver livestock.
Absolutely.
Just principles. You just got to incorporate the principles of soil health, and that's it.
Absolutely.
And we talked about mental health being tied to nutrition, but also think about, in my mind, I think about what it would mean for the healthcare system. Yes. If all of a sudden the food that you were sourcing had, nutrient rich, it had a healthy microbiome and biodiversity, the cattle eating healthy soil, and then you're ingesting that into your body. And with all the other technological advancements we have going on today, if we could figure this out, which as all this other technological stuff advances, we're basically calling for kind of I guess, what the modern world would say is a regression in
Yeah.
agriculture, but really it's just going back to the natural way of doing things, which is advanced in its own way, of course, because there's very complex ecosystems at play. But imagine what that would mean when you go and all of a sudden you're eating the right way. You have the Apple Watches or whatever else monitoring your health over time. I think the quality of life over the next 50 years for somebody in the West, if we can figure out how to go to a regionalized food, will be unbelievable. But we have to take action. You have to still do it, and you have to break off of this reliance on government, because
Yes.
currently the current farming infrastructure is
It's a drug.
It is a drug, and it's relying on government subsidies. And
Hey,
that's not what
yeah.
REGEN is. And that's one of the problems it solves, is less input and cost for
Yep.
farmers, which Gil can talk to at length about some of the places he went and how, they're not relying on fertilizer anymore. They're not relying on equipment, because you're using animals now to do the things that you were using equipment with before.
And you mentioned something, Stetson, about a unified and concerted effort. I think that's a good segue to talk about life under the sun.
Yep. So life under the sun, when we were coming up with all of the different organizations and how to tackle this problem set, how do we perpetuate the vision of REGEN? Because there are a lot of independent regenerative farmers out there doing great work. But what does the movement mean, and why has it gained the traction that we obviously believe that it should have? So we said, how can we tackle this? Well, one, we got obviously the ranch. That's a for-profit entity. That's coupled with Gil's Operation REGEN, which is going to take these seasoned veterans and give them the necessary training. Then we can go out and source them. For example, there's a lot of land purchasing is one of the great things being bought right now, because all these hedge funds and with the recent liquidity excess in the market, the top 0.01%, I think, own more cash reserve than they ever have in the history of the world, and they're buying up land, but they're not doing anything with the land. And again, it takes a man to steward the land in order to regenerate it. So what can you do? Well, if we're training these guys to go out and be regenerative ranchers, they can go and regenerate that land that's just sitting there, and start this process of creating these regionalized food systems. So we got that. Those working in cohort, the for-profit ranch and Operation REGEN with Gil. And then we said, well, we need a nonprofit to tie all these people together. So we said, why not Life Under the Sun? And the name comes from, we sourced it from King Solomon, who, after all of his trials and tribulations, he looked at the end of the day and said, what is good is to eat and drink and enjoy life under the sun.
Yep.
So that's kind of where we pulled it from. And, I think it does have some, interesting parallels with the vision. But the idea behind Life Under the Sun is we find the best regenerative ranchers in the world, and we recruit them toward this vision of perpetuating the movement of regen ranching. And we find independent ranchers, and we bring them in, and we go ask for money, and we deploy that money to the front lines of what we consider this ecological line of disaster and desertion. And we get those resources out where they need to be. And maybe they come up under our umbrella. And, we also, with some other organizations, solve their distribution issues, solve their sales issues. And we become a food production company over time. We start small with our one ranch, and we grow over time to a food production company, and we compete with the biggest food producers in the country. And people say, well, that's a grand vision. How can you do that? How's that possible? Well, again, that goes back to the veteran mindset of, it is a grand vision, but I think it could be accomplished just one step at a time. And it's about, just getting it done at the end of the day, and moving and taking action and recognizing we have a problem in this country. Well, why don't we use veterans to solve it, and use their dynamic nature to solve what is a grand vision?
Yep. And I have to imagine normal agriculture and the people that, have stakes in that, they probably don't take too kindly to regenerative farming and this movement. What are some of the oppositions? What are some of the things you guys run into? Because I have to imagine there's probably, a big mechanism that is trying to continue working and continue spinning its gears like it's been doing for so many decades and so many years.
I can talk that piece. Any day is all about change. People are uncomfortable with change, or don't know how to be comfortable being uncomfortable. And just know that Stetson and I are amateurs in REGEN. All we know is REGEN. which is, it has its own advantages, right? But the guys who've been doing fourth generation, fifth generation commercial, they have a big place for us. They have experience that we cannot overlook because they're the ones that are teaching us.
Yeah.
Now, to convert principles and philosophy and culture is hard. For example, the military, right? We've been at war for 20 years. Now we're trying to go back to garrison where the biggest event is national training centers. You know how hard it is to do that? We're 20 years fighting.
Yeah.
Remember that first lieutenant or that private after 20 years, now they're sergeant majors, but all they have been doing is fighting. I'm trying to convert those mindset. Hey, just go back to garrison, only train for national training centers. That's our exact same thing with agriculture. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's a huge culture shift, a huge way of thinking. But we can never dismiss those guys to be doing it for generations. But it is the opposition is change. At the end of the day, if I would sum it up, change, education, and willing to change. Most people change out of necessity because their land is not collaborating. They can't produce anymore because they're not in the business of growing grass. They're in the business of how to get more pound per cattle using inputs like hay, right? And regenerative agriculture is all about kicking the hay habit, but that takes a shift, and that's hard. That's hard.
And there's a saying, to people unfamiliar with regenerative ranching, that all regenerative ranchers and farmers are grass farmers, and because at the end of the day, it's all about the soil health. That's what you're focused on, because that's the first domino to fall. The compounding effect of getting the complex ecosystem right in the soil is what affects everything else, to include the livestock health, the produce health, etc. But one important point I think to mention is some, the mechanisms that support current centralized farming and agriculture.
Mm-hmm.
It's government subsidy based. It's very difficult if you're a farmer or rancher and you have X amount of money coming in and you have the government backing you, to just stiff arm that and say, I'm going to go with this completely new methodology. That, by the way, it does have some upfront costs to get involved with it, because you're going to be transitioning. It takes takes time for the soil to regenerate. It's not easy. So we're certainly not sitting here saying that that's some easy transition that everybody should just snap their fingers and do it. There's a reason that there's a barrier.
Yeah.
And it will take time. But again, and that's where Gil, I think, is right. If you have a piece of land and you start with regenerative ranching like we're doing, and you also start without any, learned, what we would consider, I guess, bad habits or principles that don't necessarily align with how you would do regenerative ranching, you kind of have an advantage because you don't have to forget anything.
Yeah,
exactly.
Absolutely. It seems one of the easiest ways to start correcting, self-correcting where we're headed, because looking at our trend, like the biggest thing that I see, and you can research it and see it, our soil is not doing good at all whatsoever. Mm-hmm. We've taken everything we can get out of it, and we're never putting anything back. And, and at some point, people is like, they want to think that we're doomsday preppers or tinfoil hat wearers. Like, there's only so much that we can just push aside and ignore before it bites us in the ass. And we have to start doing the work now. What does the future look like if we don't start implementing this? If we don't start pushing for this?
So, I'm not a scientist, nor is Gil, but there are some clear trends that are going on that really can't be argued. And there's specific examples, I think, of some ecological disasters that regenerative ranching is a solution for. Mm-hmm. And one of my favorite is, if you look up the Mississippi River, that's where the majority of farming happens in the United States. Well, they till. Yep. So what happens? The ground doesn't hold water and moisture. So when it rains, what happens? All that fertilizer gets washed into the Mississippi, and then it gets washed down into the Gulf of Mexico. And I'm from South Alabama originally, so I'm very familiar with the Gulf of Mexico. And
I'm right here in Destin.
Yeah, there you go. So you look at it every single day.
Yep.
And guess what happens every single year in the Gulf of Mexico because of exactly what I just mentioned? There's a giant dead zone. I think I pulled up right here the specific statistics of it.
Yeah.
But every year there's a 6,000 square mile dead zone in the Gulf of Mexico because that fertilizer washes into the Gulf. It creates an algae bloom that sucks all the oxygen, and it kills all living life. And in 2017, the largest dead zone ever recorded was in the Gulf of Mexico at 9,000 square miles.
Jeez.
Okay. So a lot of people, they tie, all right, regenerative ranching is part of an ideological movement for climate change. No, that's not the case. Yes, if you do regenerative ranching, you are sequestering carbon. But I have I'm not going to sit here and argue whether or not the carbon argument. There's people that can debate that and whatever else. Let's put that aside. There is clear ecological disaster going on that is affecting our country. That's one of them. The other one is the desertification of the topsoil that you mentioned to start this portion of the conversation off. There is a desertification of the soil, and that has profound consequences on microclimates. And the studies and the data on that, I think, is pretty clear when you talk about, micro rains. And if you have a 10,000 acre ranch and it was all desertified, the microclimate in that area, along with the complex nature and the diversity of the biology, when you have it all working harmoniously, the rain structure changes, the moisture precipitation level changes, how much water the ground hold changes, and it changes everything in terms of the biology of the soil itself.
I agree. And
yeah, go ahead, Gil.
I was going to add to that. So Alejandro Carrillo, he's coming to our ranch in May, and he's a perfect example of what Stetson was talking about. He has about 30,000 acres. He was able to affect his microclimate just on his 30,000 acre ranch because the principles of REGEN. Now, he has amazing studies and he's teaching around the world. He has neighbors that are not receiving any rain. He has pictures of his ranch only receiving rain because he changed the microclimate. Obviously, you need a large volume of land to do that, but he has it and he did it. And that's why he's getting asked to teach around the world because of what he's done. Just through simple principles, and he's leading his management through observation. There's no scripture, there's no formula. And Dr. Alan Williams talks about that. Hey, you can't run a regenerative ranch on a scripture or on a silo like the military is. You're going to do this, you're going to report this time. You can't do that in regenerative. You got to lead your management through observation. And then yes, there's some structure involved, but you gotta feel, taste, and look with your eyes to lead your management practices.
Yeah, be able to see the change and adapt to it instantly at the moment. That's blowing my mind. I've never heard of that. Being able to actually influence the climate that your ranch is on. That's fucking.
And it's the thing. And we talked about soil degradation. We talked about water pollution, and we talked about if there was an answer to climate change, it's carbon sequestration. And guess what? The more regenerative.
Hang on a second. Let me get Greta on the phone. We gotta get Greta Thunberg on here because we're gonna blow her tiny little mind with this because it's blowing my mind. Like,
right. Well, I mean, think about this though. The more the soil is regenerated, the more carbon sequestration there is. So guess what? You're storing carbon in the ground and then utilizing it for man's benefit. So if climate change is a problem to the point where, all right, we need to somehow sequester carbon, where regenerative ranching is the answer. Okay. It can be certainly one of the largest pieces of that answer.
Yeah.
The other thing we didn't talk about is when you said, what does the future look like? And when I think about, when I imagine the future, if we continue to go down our path, it's the loss of biodiversity. I mean, obviously there's plenty of studies that show monarch butterfly population decreased, honeybee population decreased. Well, of course they're decreasing because we're doing food production without needing them because we're doing inputs with fertilizer. When you go back to what we're talking about, you explode the diversity. And the whole idea, one of the actually principles of regenerative ranching is diversity. Diversity of crop, diversity of animals, mixing it all together like nature intended as opposed to doing monocrops. Okay, because when you do monocrops, guess what you're doing? You're suppressing the seed bed. Yeah, exactly. You're suppressing the seed bed under the ground and all of these rich, diverse plants that the animals eat that actually have an effect on their body. They're not just like us, just like we're not meant to eat chicken all day. Animals aren't meant to eat one type of grass all day. That's not the way it's meant to be. So if you continue to drive forward what we're talking about, and you lose these seed beds of these plants that haven't shown themselves in some cases for over 100 years because of the way we've been doing agriculture and tilling, that's a problem. Because, again, it goes back to man was meant to steward land.
Yep.
And when you start suppressing nature, it has unintended consequences in a very complex way that man, through his own hubris, can't even predict. So I don't know what the answer to your question is, but I don't think it would be good.
Yeah.
No, I agree. And I think because we do have most ranchers want to take care of their ranch only, right? Which needs to happen. You got to take care of your ranch first before you can move the line of certification. So we're accomplishing that at our ranch. But to move the line, the certification, we need a unified and concerted effort. That's what we're trying to buy. And our vision is bold, by several ranches tied to municipalities, right? So we can farm out the veterans we train. So now we have a lot of ranches that we own that we're going to guarantee placement, which is part of our vision, right? In order to move the line to certification. But that's going to take a unified and concerted effort. And who knows how to operate better than anyone on decentralized? Veterans.
Yep.
For Danny, if I get you, for example, if our next ranch is in Florida, then you're going to come to our program, Operation REGEN. We're not only going to teach you the soil health principles, we're going to teach you the mechanics, how to build fence, tractor driving, just like the military. We teach everything you need to know to start right away. And part of our vision is to give you a comprehensive package. Hey, Danny, you're going to be going to ranch to Florida, be a manager. We're going to give you set equipment, set animals that we already bred on our first ranch. Now you can start right away with the principles of REGEN.
Oh shit!
And we're going to be strategic about this. Next ranch we buy, we're not going to man it. We want 1 year rest. That second year, that next ranch manager will be put in place. And I don't care if he has experience, because they're going to have 6 months of good habit, and they don't need to worry about support, because they get the support of Operation REGEN. They get the support of Life Under the Sun. They get support of Oklahoma, the first ranch. And as we build, mutual support increases.
Yep.
Does that make sense? That's our vision, and the reason why we can pull it off. We have a 3D.
And Gil, that's a great point, Gil. Go ahead, Denny.
Yeah, it's almost like both of you have had prior training in how to properly execute and plan operations like this. I don't know.
Well,
that's what I love. It's because everything that I try, everything that I told myself I couldn't do before I found my passion, I was able to self-correct and say, no, I've been able to do this. I just need to frame it in the right lens, frame it within my tool sets as a warrant officer. And the beauty of this is watching and hearing you put it together. It's you're doing everything that you're passionate about with the tool sets and the ingenuity and everything that you were trained for. A lot of times people that are trying to help us and place us in our new careers, they want to take away, like you were saying, Stetson, take away the military. Don't put that on your resume. Don't talk about this. Don't utilize that. This is why this program is going to be extremely successful, because any veteran that comes out of service and walks into your office or walks into your program and they see the road to war paved out, how the program works, like, oh, I know how to operate with this. This makes sense to me. Like that, the way you just broke it down, I'm like, oh, fuck yeah, this is a campaign plan. Okay, got it. Like this.
Yeah, exactly. And, me and Gil.
Road to REGEN.
Yes.
There we go. Yeah. Well, me and Gil were even talking about it one time, and we were like, we need to standardize. Like, if you have, these ranches are obviously going to be geographically dislocated, a lot like military operation, but that doesn't mean you can't be mutually supported just because you're separated.
Yes.
And so a lot of ranchers and farmers are out there are isolated. They have a high suicide rate. They're alone. They're toiling. That's not what this program is going to be about. We will have mutually supporting ranches. If you have a problem on your ranch, well, you're going to be briefing up to Gil DeLeon and saying, hey, look at my map. Look at where I have the water sources. Look where I'm doing X, Y, Z. Look how my grazing pattern is.
Yeah.
And the other ranch managers can look at that and be like, okay, I just did this, and here's some lessons learned or whatever else. And me and Gil were talking, it goes back to, just the military standard of acetate sheets and doing your plans and everything else. I was like, why can't we do that with ranching? And not only that, let's standardize our symbols.
Yeah.
Because, Gil brought up a great point with me one day where he went to a certain ranch and they were doing these briefs. at this ranch, and they all had different
Symbols.
different icons and symbols for how they were trying to tell the ranch manager, because it was a huge ranch with multiple people, and in some cases I think it had different. They were in different states, but the ranch manager was having to reorient himself every time somebody gave a brief. But he never recommended doing standardized symbology like we understand that it's kind of inherent in a unified operation that you need to have. It's just standard SOPs. So I don't know. I just think there's certain parallels and crossovers that just kind of fit. And I'm excited to see where this goes in the future. And the idea of having mutually supporting ranches, I don't know. It blows my mind in some sense. And it's like, I don't think it would be completely unfamiliar to any seasoned veteran when they come out and say, "Hey, I know exactly how to operate in this environment."
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, it speaks exactly to everything that a guy or girl that's leaving the military after serving. It's so easy to go into a system like, oh yeah, like I know this language. This is exactly what I'm used to. And now I'm connecting and doing something that I love doing. Gilberto, I want to ask you, when you started, and I know you were still in when you started this journey, how did, it's still in, when you're in this and you're sort of finding your new identity, how did that feel mentally, spiritually, going into this new work and sort of finding yourself saying like, okay, there's something to this?
Yeah. And we discussed this already prior to the podcast, but so as I was transitioning, and Kornegay can tell you this, I had a rough journey transitioning because I was also finding another problem with what happened to me in Afghanistan and trying to provide justice for thousands of soldiers. You should look that up. I'm on Fox News about that too. And that could probably be another podcast. But anyways.
Hell yeah.
I try to go the corporate route because when you enter the transition program in the military, guess what's out there? Guess what's in your face? Google, Amazon, Home Depot, corporate, which is fine. I'm not knocking those guys because we veterans do have value when it comes to business management. However, the culture is not really there. I tried to go down the route and I was not fully satisfied, right? Because it ain't time, because I am Catholic, I am Christian, and there was something missing. So I took a sabbatical, and Stetson helped me with this process too, because I don't know who I am. Who am I? There's no culture. I was having a hard time. I was actually losing myself as a husband and father because I was scared. We're the spiritual leader of the household. We're also the provider. I was like, I don't know what to do here. So I took a sabbatical, and I'm like, agriculture's the way. I get to work with the land, put my hands in the soil, and still lead like I've been doing in the military. Bring veterans and have my small team decentralized running ranches. Yes. Just like we do in Afghanistan. I'm a team leader. I got guys in Donkey. I got guys in HKIA. I got guys in, Erbil, Iraq. But guess what? We're all together sharing same platforms. We can do that with regenerative agriculture as we expand. That is purpose. We need to regenerate our lands, protect our food security, and regenerate the minds of our veterans, provide new culture. That's what we're about. And also, like, building skill sets. And that's what got me into this. And yes, I can be a little bit of a salesman, or I am that passionate.
Well, and Gil, I'll tell you this, talking about, because again, security hall, focuses on mental health a lot of times. Me and Gil were battle buddies in Afghanistan. Gil gets out. And I'll give a brief overview, Gil, if you don't mind, on your behalf, because what you did with this other program, this battle you fought, in my opinion, is still amazing. And you've served as a tremendous example to me as a friend about how to handle yourself in extreme crisis. But he was involved in a situation known as GRAP, and it was a guard recruiting program that there was some fraud involved, by a few individuals. And then the government had a knee-jerk reaction on it a long time ago, and they said, we're going to investigate everybody. Well, through the investigative process, everybody was what's known in the military as titled. So when Gil told me about this, I was shocked. I was like, how can this be? Well, this is still a problem that's unfolding within the military, but Gil, because of his efforts reaching out to people in the Pentagon, reaching out to certain congressmen, and fighting for these individual soldiers' justice, thousands of soldiers have gotten a letter saying, we've removed your title, because the titling process in the military is flawed. And it's something that's being addressed right now. So Gil's been fighting on multiple fronts. And so as a friend and a battle buddy, sometimes you got to check in with your battle buddy once.
Yep.
But when he's going through something like that, I was mind blown at number one, the personal courage he had to address the issue, but two, the fact that he was actually able to get results. So then when I'm talking to the entrepreneurs that I'm working with on the land, I said, you got to check this guy out. And they were like, my gosh, this guy makes things happen. He's they call him a force of nature. And you need that because in ranching, there's going to be some tough times. It's not easy work. We talk about it passionately, but it doesn't mean it's going to be easy. So Gil, that should be another podcast, I think, talking about that journey and the justice you brought to thousands of soldiers because of how you tactfully tackled the Pentagon and the injustice of the entire titling system. And as a battle buddy, all I can say is, a thank you. Since I thanked you privately, but I want to thank you publicly for the example that you showed me, honestly, because I don't know how you kept your composure during that. I'm impressed by it.
And I appreciate that, but it goes back to your point, Stetson and Danny, why veterans fit.
Yep.
We know how to operate during hardship, how to operate on sterile environments, and how to build a knitted team. That's what regenerative agriculture needs in order to move the line to certification, right? That's what we need. And ranching veterans and Army veterans have a lot in common. Yeah, we all have dark humor. We know how to operate. Hey, I've been around the world, man. Those ranchers got some dark humor like we do. The Christians, they don't know how to tie land. And when things go wrong, when you build the fence or the cattle escapes, man, it's colorful language. Just like I'm like, oh my God, it's a perfect spot for veterans to come into ranch.
Yeah.
And it's a beautiful thing. And yes, by nature, I'm not a real cowboy. However, airborne ranger, I was a cavalry officer. Perfect. And Stetson, most of these guys, agriculture and veterans have a lot of similarities. Mm-hmm. And there's someone out there that I can't put my finger on it. We're that common. We have common ground. Common ground is not only our soil, but what we bring to the table. Yeah. The skill sets, But yeah, I just want to thank, Stetson for talking about that. But it goes back to your point, Danny. That's the reason why veterans need to go into agriculture and regen specifically.
Yeah, absolutely. It's, and it's not the world of Yellowstone. It's not. You're not going into that world of drama. I think that the most attractive thing is connecting back to nature. Yes. Connecting back to a better way of living.
Mindfulness. Yeah.
The absolute nightmare of being stuck. I like traveling. I like being able to go places, but I never want to live in an urban environment. And I think that's something that connects almost all veterans. I think all of us are looking to go somewhere where we can be in nature, that we can go back and actually be involved with bringing life into this world and doing things that connect us to our land. And, there's a reason why people are starting to leave the city. There's a reason why veterans are trying to go out there and homestead on their own. Now more than ever, it's more attractive. So how do we put you out in the forefront? How can we?
You're doing it.
Yeah.
You're getting the right people and establishing a front line with us. We can't do it ourselves.
Yep.
And the Factory and Biosearch podcast is a signal of it's a gap that we're trying to fill and people are trying to find it. And you found it, Danny. You were the guy that helping us get to the front lines, right? And that it's going to take guys like you to figure out what's our demands and give them a voice.
Yeah.
And so that's why we Stetson and I are going to thank you for that. And you already answered your own question. How? Guys like you.
Absolutely. What's real quick, what's the website? How can people get in touch with you guys? How can we get veterans to contact you to get involved?
Okay, simple. Since we're building a plane in flight, talking like airborne, right? We have no.
I love it.
However, we don't got a website yet because we want to fully establish ourselves. But you can find Stetson and I through LinkedIn. Through LinkedIn, my name is Gilberto de Leon. The name of the nonprofit is Operation Regen, and the other one is Life Under the Sun. And we'll slowly build our websites because we're starting from a blank canvas. Right now, we're in the educational process, but we're also executing. And we actually have our first 2 veterans coming this September because we're not afraid to train as we're learning.
As you're learning, yeah.
Train the trainer. That's what veterans are good for. And not only that, knowledge plus execution equals confidence.
Yeah.
So you know I'm not an expert, but if I'm forced to teach an ex-veteran, guess what I have to do? I need to learn rapidly in order to confidently teach. Therefore, it helps me out and helps the next veteran out.
Absolutely.
So find me on LinkedIn as of right now, and or Facebook, and join our Facebook group called Operation Regen and LinkedIn group Operation Regen.
I will have those on the episode description, and I will also have that on the website, and I'll try to get you guys on our new upcoming project. We're releasing something coming up, but you'll definitely going to be put on our blog post about that. I love the fact that you guys are willing to build as you're going, because I don't want guys or girls or anybody that's transitioning to miss out on this opportunity. I know you're hearing it. I know you're having conversations with others, but so am I. And so are other people that help put together this podcast. There is a group of individuals that is growing by the day that want to be connected into agriculture, but they don't want to do it in a traditional way. They don't want to be part of traditional farming. They want to be part of something new that actually takes on ownership of the land and is able to do it with care, love for not only the food they're putting on their table, the way they're providing for their family, but for nature itself. And I think Regen is something that we need to promote and have people brought into this world, because maybe it's not at the forefront of a veteran's mind. Maybe they're thinking that, hey, the only way that I'm going to make a living when I transition is going to the corporate world. But what if we get them in front of you or get them in front of Stetson, and they can see that, oh shit, no, these are my people. These are, yeah. Yeah.
It's a calling. It's our second mission after we retire from the military or get out from the military.
But I just want to take some time to tell you, thank you so much for being on here today. I can't tell you how valuable this mission is and how needed it is. I just want to be able to connect you with every other organization that I know, because I feel that the other big thing that we need to highlight is how therapeutic this is. There's a reason why there's so many people that go out there and do therapy with horses, with canines. Being able to connect with another living organism, being able to work through and put your hands on something tangible. Not all of us can benefit from actual normal talk therapy. Everybody has their own path to healing. What worked for me won't necessarily work for you or somebody else. There is a lot of evidence for being able to take somebody that's never been on a farm, never done agricultural work, and put them in that environment and teach them how to care for animals, teach him how to work on the land, teach him how to think of something else other than himself.
Yes.
Put him in the present moment, grounded into his environment. That has a powerful impact on your mental health. And it can actually be the catalyst for the change you need without ever having to step into an office with a professional. Or maybe you do. Maybe that's also part of it. But I know for a fact there are individuals right now that I talk to, that I'm good friends with, that did a lot of equine therapy, did a lot of treatment, being there on a farm and working in the stables. And the change that they had afterwards, the change that they had after that experience, like, you can't discount that. You can't say like, oh, there's nothing to that.
You cannot. So I'm actually doing equine therapy for my PTSD, and the facts are there. So we're going to try to cover down a range too. But you're right, it's therapeutic, and and whether you're religious or not, you cannot deny that there's something higher than us out there when you're being a steward of your land and animals. But we can't control our ecology. We can't control the land. In fact, most scientists does not have a great understanding what's going underneath the soil.
Yeah.
So it's like even having blind faith in God. You don't know you don't physically see him, but he's there.
Yes.
Same thing with the soil. That makes sense. Like that's when veterans find themselves in agriculture, their medication goes down.
Yeah.
You know, like I'm stationed in Fort Carson, Colorado now, getting ready to retire soon. Every time I go to Oklahoma to help with managing the ranch, I forget about everything. I come back to Colorado, it's like, man, I can't wait to retire. want to go back to that land. I want to get dirt in my mouth because there's something there. And you're right. Yes, there are administrative requirements in the office, but most of the time you're outside. That's your office. An unparamedic, like on a limited view, working with animals, regenerating our minds, which is the hardest service.
Yep.
But yeah, Kornegay came back on, and he was just
I do want to give you. I want to focus on you for a second, Kornegay, before we leave. What about you in a sense of what are some of the benefits that you've seen in mood, mental health, and your ability to just not be upregulated and be as stressed of being out in the land and being around natural environment? Because when we're wearing a uniform, I was never thinking about like, oh, I need to be outside to just, relieve stress. I was like, what's the next mission? What's the next office meeting I need to do? What's the next email that's going to come in and just drive me up the walls?
Well, I always tell people, one of the more eye-opening experiences I have is even if you're in the military, you're in the West, you're still in a bubble. So when I deployed to Afghanistan and you see kind of death and destruction around you, and then when I came back and saw my daughter being born, both of those are extreme experiences, and they're their own spiritual experiences. So and then when you go out to the land, and I guess my purpose of saying that is like seeing both of those things, and you see such a dichotomy of human nature, and you see life being born and life being destroyed. It's like, man, let's get out of that bubble. Let's reconnect to whatever it is that aligns us as humans to humanity itself. So when you go out to the land, I grew up in a rural area, so I was fortunate enough to kind of be around land and kind of integrate with nature pretty often in terms of meditation, I guess you could say. But even with that, when you go out there and then but when you steward the land, there's a difference. And when you see stewardship going on, there's a difference. And man is meant to steward the land. He's called to that, I think. So there is an alignment, I think, that happens. And it is it's kind of a hard thing to articulate, but it does exist. It is there. And I think anybody who goes out is going to have a positive experience.
Absolutely.
And even though I grew up in a rural area, the distinction I draw is you can be out in nature. That's one thing. Stewarding the land is another. It brings a different sense of purpose, I guess, to integrating with nature. So that's maybe a little bit different take on it than some other perspectives.
Just real quick plug in. So our owners, their brothers, their twins, they're theologians, they're former pastors. So think about that. A lot of the problem with ranching is like sometimes a lot of the owners are sending guys to regenerative schools, but they come back, they want to teach that. But now he has a hurdle to convert the landlord. Hey, this is the way we should do it. And boots on the ground should make decisions. What we have on our side, what's advantageous to us, is our twin brothers were former pastors and they love theology. And they know truly that you cannot exclude human from nature. So when Stetson and I say, hey, I think we should go this route, it's like, I'm all on board because they're diligent and they're trying to, and his mission and my mission is Operation Regen and Life Under the Sun. Our brother's mission is Mission Regen, that macro vision, which is, it's just crazy. But to have owners like that are tied to land and they got degrees in theology, that's why we think we're going to make this possible. It's not if, it's when. This bold vision, we can execute and pull it off because our members, we have 8, the all divergent, the all dynamic, and the all diverse, which is the principles of soul health, which is diversity. We have that in our own team. We got minorities, we got veterans, we got whites, diversity. So even our team is living the principles of soil health, team members.
Man, I'm sold. That's beautiful, brother. Again, I want to thank both of you for coming on today. I believe in your mission. Whatever I can do, whatever we can do to amplify your message and to get you in front of other veterans, because there's something to providing more options to get people outside into nature and fighting what I believe is arguably the most important war. And that's taking care of ourselves. We can feed our families, feed our children. And we're not going to do that by just continuing those same traditional ways. So thank you again, both Stetson and Gilberto, for being here today. Please reach out to them. I'll have all their contact information on the episode description. Until next time, folks, take care.